Good afternoon, everyone. Angela's introduction didn't mention that I am Margaret Hagan's #1 fanboy.
The feeling is mutual, so.
Margaret, I want to start with a big picture question. ChatGPT was released on November 30th, 2022. Today, 2 years in, what is your assessment of the potential of generative artificial intelligence to improve access to justice? What would you say to the people who say it's been overhyped as a panacea and that the risks of using generative AI, particularly in serving the low-income population, are enormous? Where are you on the spectrum of optimism and skepticism?
I'm trying to be right in the middle. I'm trying to be neutral and clear-eyed, which means I think 2 years in, let's think of it from the point of view of some different stakeholders. From the point of view of the public, who we've been interviewing in our lab, we've been recruiting people online to ask them, do you ever use AI for solving life problems, legal problems? We've been running studies where we intercept people in the lobbies of county courthouses and ask them the same question. We see a growing number of people who are using ChatGPT, Google Gemini, other kinds of AI tools as a life coach, as a consultant, including on legal things. So we've met landlords who always go to ChatGPT to figure out, for this particular tenant, what rights do I have? What does the law say? We see tenants doing the same thing. So I think we're only going to see increased numbers of the public using these large, powerful, well-funded, and freely available or very inexpensively available large language models for legal problem solving. That cat's out of the bag, and it's only going to get faster. But let's look at it from some other stakeholders' points of view, from legal service providers like legal aid groups. I think in the past few months, especially the past year, we've seen more pilot work, more experimentation, not among all legal aid groups, but if you talk to colleagues at LSC, I think we can see some interesting new pilots, whether it's internal use inside of legal aid groups for knowledge management, for training purposes, training of pro bono volunteers, training of new employees, spreading of knowledge, maybe even putting a chatbot on their website, like in North Carolina, to help people find the right guide. So I think there's a scoping of lower risk use cases that can improve services. So I think there's some kind of cautious piloting going on in legal aid. And I think from regulators' points of view, and I'm very interested to hear more, but I think there's thoughts about how do we use the toolbox that we have mainly as state bar regulators focused on lawyers and lawyer misbehavior. Maybe we can regulate lawyers' use of AI using that typical toolbox. But for this whole new world of technology companies now providing legal advice and legal services online, I don't think they feel prepared to regulate in this new space. So I think there's a huge question mark about what regulation will look like. But I think it's here, and I think now is the moment for people in this room and other folks in our kind of access to justice ecosystem to be thinking on a 10-year horizon. What do we want the vision of us in 10 years to look like? Where can we integrate AI responsibly? And what can we be doing now to plan for that, hopefully responsible AI future?
You mentioned that there have been, on an individualized basis, some great uses of AI in a variety of contexts in the world of legal aid. I want to give a couple of examples of localized direct-to-consumer use. One is Rentervention in Illinois. The other is Housing Court Answers in New York. Those are local pilot programs. The access to justice crisis is a national problem of huge scale. What is your assessment of the potential of generative AI to scale at a national level to accomplish a significant improvement in access to justice?
I think that's what takes the visionary work right now. I think if we kind of go along, which I think often happens in the legal system because we have most of our innovations happen at this hyper local level, not just in one county, but one organization or one even lawyer in one organization launching a really interesting pilot. It's so hard to then take from that one lawyer to then get all the other lawyers around the country doing parallel work with maybe variations in what the law actually says or how practice actually works. But it's so hard to go from that one pilot in Chicago to then scale to the whole need. We need to be thinking about how to collect data in a coordinated way, train models in coordinated ways, and plan for kind of the development that applications can, that if they work in Chicago, that there is funding and technical support to help adapt them for kind of national localization. But that takes more creative ways of funding things. It takes multi-jurisdictional funding, multi-year funding, and hiring of CIOs, CTOs, technical staff who are really good at this new era of AI models and AI agents. It's a different kind of team.
I want to home in on that. For the past 2 decades, the deployment of technology to improve access to justice at a national scale has been impeded by our system of federalism. And I'll give an example. We've had for some years great document assembly tools that work like TurboTax for law. They allow a user, not a lawyer, to respond to questions in an interview in plain language, and then an app uses their answers to the questions to populate a court-approved form that then they can e-file or print out and file in the conventional way. But if you create a document assembly tool to provide help for a tenant-facing eviction in Mississippi, what you've got is a tool that helps a tenant-facing eviction in Mississippi. It does no good in Maine. It doesn't have any application to any other type of case. And the problem is exacerbated in states that don't have unified court systems, where you don't have standard forms in use across the state, but maybe different forms in different counties in the state, or sometimes different forms in different courtrooms in the same courthouse. So that's kind of baked in, this problem of federalism. Do you think that generative AI can help tackle that problem of differences in case type and jurisdictional law? I'm just mindful of the reality that most legal problems that low-income people experience are matters of state law, not federal.
So when I present that hypothetical to engineering colleagues, they're like, no problem. AI is amazing. It can learn everything so quickly. Like, now that you don't have to have subject matter experts writing out the exact rules of how the form should be filled in and putting all of that laborious knowledge step by step manually, AI will learn quicker. It can be retrained quicker. It can produce those documents. You do not need to do all of that exhaustive mapping out of the knowledge.
Can I
We know we have to be skeptical of that engineering point of view. Yeah.
I want to probe that. So one of the challenges of document assembly tools is that they've been incredibly labor intensive to create, to go through the branching logic that will tie the answers to the interview questions to the court-approved form. Can AI help with that step?
AI can learn very quickly. It can intuit what the learning is without this exhaustive. Imagine that you don't have to teach it like an intern every single step, but you can show it examples and it can learn intuitively from your examples how to fill in that form correctly, what a good motion looks like, how to interview people effectively. It can learn more quickly, but the missing step is the legal knowledge that right now, LLMs, the large language models, these very smart things, are being built by people with no expertise in the law and what makes something good or bad at interviewing clients, at filling in documents, at answering legal questions. They have very general metrics that they're measuring. Is our AI good or not? Is it unbiased? Is it fast? Is it generally accurate? But there's no legal experts. There's no one like the folks in the room inside OpenAI, Google Gemini, Meta and Llama, all of the 50 companies that are building large language models. They don't know what the people in this room know about good quality legal information and tasks. So what we need to do is get our house in order and be in conversation with them so that not only can these LLMs be so powerful and trained well, but that we might see a future where they actually know how to train them well for law. And that's what we see happening in medicine, that there are groups, professional groups in healthcare who are partnering with some of these large technology companies to develop specialized large language models for medical information and for health use cases. They're getting their subject matter experts in the same room with the technical experts to make sure those models understand what is good and bad, helpful, harmful, illegal, and legal in the medical domain. We don't have those kind of relationships right now for the legal system and the technology companies.
What are the prospects for that changing?
Let's talk.
You've identified the problem.
Yes.
You're the solutions person. What's
Yes.
going on?
Well, I think see it from their eyes as I talk to more and more non-lawyers around Silicon Valley who work with or work at these large AI companies. They are interested in volume. They want to know the stats about how many people have legal needs. If we built a specialized legal large language model, how often would it be used? They are sheerly looking at volume. And also, do you have your data ready? If we want to work with legal experts and build a really smart and well-protected, good guardrails AI models, does your industry have its data in order that we can start training the model soon? And I have to say, well, we're a little bit federated, a bit divided, but the more that we're coordinated, bringing data together, being able to kind of speak in a stronger national voice, I think the easier it is to make partnerships.
Well, that's interesting. That sounds like a confluence of interests. They're only interested in huge national solutions. They're not interested in the
Niche.
tenant-facing eviction in Mississippi.
Well, they'd love to have that as a use case, but for their business model and their investments, they need to demonstrate volume. Yeah.
Okay, so we have the capacity to demonstrate a need for volume. Where do you see things going next? And if you have any uptake on your outreach to the engineering world?
Well, I think conversations, that's great. But I think the more that we can see, even if it's not every 50 state plus territories all saying, yes, here is our data, or we're going to work together on not one-off pilots, but more collaborative AI development. Even if we have a network of 10 states or 15 legal aid organizations or court help centers who are willing to kind of come together and share data, share their subject matter expertise, get in the same room with a large language model company and say, this is what good AI in the space would look like. This is what dangerous or harmful things could happen, and start having that kind of subject matter expertise training. That's what we kind of need to be doing, and seeing which of these large language model tech companies are receptive and open to developing responsible AI in this space.
What kind of data do they need?
It depends what we want the AI to be doing. So this is also what we need to be deciding. We could focus on AI that's really good at legal work, drafting motions, writing answers to eviction lawsuits, responding to discovery. We could focus on that. And then we need examples of really good motions, really good answers. We could focus on language access, and we could say we want to have really high-performing legal specific machine translation. We could then get lots of humans to review examples of translations and say what's good and bad. Or we could focus on referrals and triage and brief advice and get lots of examples of people questions and then answers and say, these are good answers, these are bad answers. But basically what we want the AI to be doing, we need to have an agenda to talk to the technology companies about those tasks.
How will they overcome differences in law among states? That seems an intractable problem.
Well, humans do know those. It's about gathering the human knowledge and not overpromising. So maybe we could think about a large language model that operates in some states and is certified in some states, but then gradually is certified in other states as more training data and more kind of evaluation certification. But we could think about a large language model that we want to basically pass the bar in certain issue areas in every state. So it doesn't have to be all or nothing, that we need something that works instantly in every issue area for every legal task in all 50 states. We can take it step by step.
So you've got a group of people here from across the country. You're saying you have a need in dealing with these engineers who have an appetite for helping out. to provide national data and some participants who are willing to come together across states to work with the engineers to develop something. What do you suggest to make that happen?
Well, I do think there's already wonderful national organizations, ABA, LSE, National Center for State Courts, like the list goes on. If we can see kind of those groups that have wonderful convening power kind of coming to the table and starting to kind of understand enough about how to interact with the technology companies, both about keeping them accountable for, what people are doing right now on ChatGPT. Like there's that conversation, but there's also the future of if we want them to build something specialized, build an amazing resource that can power local pilots and local solutions, how to start approaching the technology companies together.
So I love this idea of an interdisciplinary collaboration. It sounds not only like a good thing, but a necessary thing to bring the engineers and the legal experts together. So is it possible to train a generative AI to think like a lawyer? And let me give you a specific example to try to tackle this problem of federalism. If you have a lawyer who does housing, a legal aid lawyer who does housing work in Oklahoma, and they know the Oklahoma law of eviction inside and out, and they move to California, and California's got different rules for evictions, that lawyer is going to be able to get up to speed on the differences between California law and Oklahoma law. Lawyers move between states all the time, and they are able to master the differences in law and take up practice in a new jurisdiction. Is generative AI capable of acquiring a similar adaptability so that if you built a tool in one place and the question were how to modify that so that it might be used elsewhere, if you had the engineers talking to the lawyers, that would not be a heavy lift? Or am I dreaming?
I think that's right. I mean, it's going to be a technical solution about how to localize. If we build a big, smart, think of it almost as this new employee who has been trained on all of this information that we have fed the employee. If we've coordinated all of this data, this new AI employee has learned at the national level. We want that employee, when it goes to work in Oklahoma for an Oklahoman client, to only be thinking about the knowledge it learned about Oklahoma. That's a technical problem. So that's the conversation with the engineer. How do you localize it? How do you make sure that information from Ohio doesn't leak in as you're talking about Oklahoma? Right now, when people go to ChatGPT, those kind of protections, those localizations are not being built in. That's why we need to have these proactive conversations so that both kind of in those big, where we know people are going to be going. People are still going to be going to ChatGPT and Google Gemini more than they're going to be coming to lawyers and law help websites. So we both need to make those big, public, kind of famous AI systems better, but we want to also build really smart ones that will be working within legal organizations as well.
This doesn't sound like it's going to come cheaply. Somebody's got to pay for this. And when you talk to the entities in Silicon Valley that you've been talking to, who seem to have an interest in the concept at least, I think they were all for-profit corporations. How do you deal with the funding problem? There's a perennial problem. People come up with great ideas. We have no money in the world of access to justice.
Well, these
How are we
companies
going
have more money than you can even imagine. What they are looking for, and you can, so for those of you who are like reading about AI, you might probably know about the top AI model builders and releasers. There's OpenAI, who's working primarily with Microsoft and Apple. There's Google building Gemini. There's Meta that has its Llama model. Those are kind of the big top tier. They want to kind of be the Google search for AI. They want to be the brand name, ubiquitous, kind of who you trust for AI. But there's a good 30 other companies that are incredibly well-funded, that are looking, that have amazing technical talent, really, really amazing engineers building large language models. They can never compete with those top four, basically, and they're looking for specific niches. That's why they're partnering with like medical professionals. Maybe I'll never be the Google search of AI, but I could be the best LLM, the best large language model for medicine. So They have incredible amounts of funding. They just need to demonstrate that they can do very well in a specific vertical. So they're not always looking for pay us large amounts of money to develop this. A lot of it is paying in data and expertise. So if we can help them develop a very strong large language model, that's the kind of main criteria they're looking for. It's not, can you pay us to build it? It's, can you prepare the data and help us understand the space enough that we can develop a very effective model?
Are you saying that they would do this as a matter of philanthropy for the world of access to justice? Or do you think there's a way they can make money on it?
I really don't know. I mean, that's why we need to have more conversations or even issue an RFP to see who would be interested in working in the space. But especially knowing that we'd want a very low cost, but also very high quality AI model to be powering legal aid services, court help services. I think now is the time to start exploring where there might be a business model or licensing arrangement, but it's a lot of work to gather this data and gather lawyer expertise. What I keep hearing from the technology companies is that lawyers are expensive. We can't afford to pay them to help us build our AI better. So they can't get in touch with lawyers who will help them make their AI better. There's lots of lawyers in this room, and I think a lot of them want the AI to be better. It's just figuring out what the terms of an arrangement could be, that we could be working with one or multiple of these AI companies to build a stronger AI system.
Well, two things occur to me about possible funding. One, what you're describing as a possibility for generative AI, if you can bring the lawyers and the engineers together, would surely have applications in the commercial legal world. And they could make money by selling it to law firms, and then might be willing to take on the cost of providing it free to the access to justice world as a consequence of that. Second, if you're talking about thinking on a grand scale here, they're interested in scale. They want big things. I would imagine, this may seem counterintuitive, that it might be easier to get funding from more conventional philanthropic sources, foundations, for a really big project that's going to move the needle nationally than it would be for smaller local projects. What do you think?
Yes, well, I think the Gates Foundation is very interested. I wouldn't say that they're inherently interested in but legal as a means to improve economic mobility and opportunity. So Gates Foundation has just been starting to fund in this space. They're funding very interesting semi-AI products to help people apply for Social Security disability benefits in a more efficient and hopefully successful way, manage their public benefits better. They funded our lab to work on eviction defense and reentry services, kind of specific pilots. But I think there could be an interest if there was a bigger vision of how to really move the needle. I think more dollars could be unlocked.
What's your ask of this audience?
Oh, well, to talk to each other, and even if you're skeptical, and I think it's right to be skeptical of, if you go to ChatGPT, what the quality of the answer is. That is correct. We need to be skeptical, and we need to be holding those companies accountable, pushing them to actually know about the legal space, what's risky and not. But we also need to think proactively with that 10-year vision. And that means thinking about, in my state or even in my county and region, could we think about partnering in a national way to collect our data, to go talk to the technology companies with a strong national voice, and start thinking, what is the AI that we do want? Even if we know what we don't want and what's risky and bad, what is it that would be responsible, that would be beneficial? And start seeing if we can get, engineers and technology companies to really work towards that vision.
So I hear that as a request for expressions of interest in working with Margaret. Is that fair?
Yeah, well, not just me.
Yes.
I think the more the national organizations that we already have, that we can be coordinated to. Yes.
Yeah. We have time for a few questions. Ron. No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sure. So one issue you haven't talked about in roadblock, I think, is us. And that has to do with the unauthorized practice of law. Legal Zoom was doing something that's just simply creating reports And it was sued in a number of states saying you can't do that. Lawyers do have a monopoly on knowledge, this is what this is all about, knowledge about the industry. And lawyers, I think, are afraid of, I'm not saying this really about all of here, but a lot of lawyers are afraid of generative AI, because they will no longer have a monopoly and they will not have enough work. How do we break through that? What can we do to get past this problem?
So there's one problem of the change management of lawyers' perceptions and lawyers' reticence. And then there's the problem of consumer protection. I don't know, Jim, if you want to take the change management of lawyers. I have a lot of thoughts about the new era of regulation we need. So if right now UPL is largely, I mean, obviously state bars are very good at regulating lawyers or people who are offering legal advice in more traditional ways, not the AI companies, based on rules. The rule of UPL, the rule of advice versus information, even if it's a little blurry, that one line is bad, one line is good. I think we need to move towards rules that are more about actual harms or mistakes. I would love to see a certification program where the AI, if I was developing a new AI model to be really good at landlord-tenant question answering in California, I could work really hard on building my AI system and I could submit it for testing. And whether the state bar regulator or their partner research arm or a university they delegate to could evaluate rigorously my AI model to see, does it have biases? Is it inaccurate? Does it have problems? And if I pass, then I get a limited license or some kind of certification to say, my AI has passed and it can be used in these use cases. It can be used in this state. I think we need to start thinking about that kind of certification or kind of clear roadway so that that legal Zoom scenario doesn't play out again. Otherwise, we're going to be really pouring cold water over a lot of possible innovation.
LegalZoom overcame their UPL problems. I believe they're operational now in all 50 states. They faced huge challenges initially, and it was a real impediment to getting capitalized. That they couldn't find investors because of the risk of UPL. I believe that one of the most significant ways they did it was by demonstrating sufficient lawyer involvement by members of the bar in the states where they operate, to satisfy regulatory authorities. But they took a while. It was very difficult for them, but they got through it.
I think we're time's up.
Okay.
Sorry, we couldn't
We're
answer
told
more
time is
questions.
up.